Okay, we usually start with AI-inspired music to get past the copyrights, but we actually wrote this one ourselves. This is called the Homeless Truck Driver's Prayer. It's about a truck driver who homeless for various reasons, and he just has a prayer to God that his soul can just drive back and forth along the roads. And it's by an Irish born singer and Simon O'Rourke, and this is it. So it's pretty rudimentary, but that and doesn't sound very polished, but that's because it's a human song. Here you go.
From my cupboard bed, I'm watching you heading home. Grim-faced and rushing, locked in your mobile phone. Tomorrow I'll be there to ignore. And I can feel the silence knocking on my bones. But the road is gone, my bottle has run dry. And I can feel the darkness scrape my soul. Cold and hungry, I got nowhere to go. And after all these miles, I got nowhere to go. I'm lonelier now than I've ever been on the road. I make good time, so I've got left alone. How far would you go to stay inside the drain? They squeeze the time, so I turn to amphetamine. But if I hit the car in the city, who knows? But I'm out here on the highway, and I can still hear her silence. Oh Lord, I know I can come home, but in your mercy, won't you let me roam? Like a lonesome breeze blowing to and fro, but I would never, no, I'd never hurt no one. But God is quiet, the bottle has run dry, and I can feel the silence in my bones. I guess I was right when I sang to you before. Tomorrow I'll be easier to ignore. Easier to ignore.
Thank you, Simon. Last of the human beings before the robots take over. Good morning, John Stapleton in Sydney. It looks beautiful there. How you going? Nice time there. 10 o'clock here. We're back in Perth. It's still January here, so it's
Really?
so marvelous.
Yeah, it's cold here. It's turning into winter very quickly.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thing. Now, how are you before we bring in our guest?
Now I'm good. Yeah, all good. Well,
Would you like to introduce our guest for today?
Jeremy Aitken. He's a young author who's just published a book called The Bike, and he's written. I published a number.
I do have a picture of that.
Published a number of his stories in a Sense of Place magazine, and he's a great, really talented writer and a really interesting chap and very entertaining history. And he wrote a series of stories about his experiences in the workplace, including working on the COVID line and working in a butcher shop and working in a
there we go.
Gym, so yeah, he's a very fascinating and interesting character. So Jeremy, welcome to.
Let's bring him in. Here he is. He's down there.
Thank you very much for that introduction, John. I liked it, the young part particularly. That's
Parody issue.
Yeah, that was great.
At John's age now,
that's relative. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me on, and appreciate it. It's beautiful here up in FNQ. Rainy season's just finished.
Where exactly? How far up are you?
Outside Cairns. If you know Cairns, it's the range around the veranda. It's the rainforest village that's up here. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, you get a bit of space. Lovely.
I always thought of you as a Sydney boy. So how did you end up there?
I was, John. A series of very fortunate events occurred. One of which is getting public, so I can't thank you enough for that. Getting back into it, getting some writing done. I was working as an academic at a university, and just thought, if I don't actually get out and do what it is I wanted to do, which is work with community, actually finish off this writing, pursue those kinds of things, I'm never going to. So I left December the 20th last year, and moved up here.
In the university? Can I ask just what was your degree?
I was teaching in human services, so mass communication. So teaching in communication, academic writing, but then you get I got very kind of stuck into that whole institutional kind of way of thinking. Lots of things occurred there.
Could you explain that?
Yeah.
You would think as a normal, I'll just give you a little bit more content to the question. You would think that academia was a place of robust ideas, just fighting back and forth, huge debates, absolutely completely free, say we want, battling each other. And yet in the COVID era, it was exposed that RMIT was paying young students to be trolls of anyone who was going up against the government, and they'd get no real penalty for it. So, and we interviewed a lot of people during COVID from universities, and they said it was just like, no, you either think this way or you're out. Is that what you experienced? And if so, how could you survive that?
Okay, I'll pull that into a couple of things and break that down for you. Yeah, previously, I can only speak from my experience. Previously to COVID, definitely, which changed the narrative. I mean, it changed the way, whether or not it was censorship directly or not, was the way we interacted and self-censored. And I can come back to that in just a moment. It changed the way that narrative was presented, the way that we spoke about it. And in my opinion, what actually occurred at this stage was organizations controlling down. So they were actually dictating it a lot, because a huge industry is international education as well. So you're catering it like you're looking at not just the actual education and the information that's being transmitted, but you're actually looking at your client base. So you've got like the nature of education during that period being entirely connected through to overseas foreign bodies who are sending through clients, sending through students. So we're changing from what is essentially like education for its own sake, knowledge for its own sake, to actually looking forward to clients. And that occurred at one of the universities that they put things up like, end racism. And you're going, well, you're coming from a position that there is, and not defining what your terms are. And there were meetings that were given as well as to what you could and couldn't say, you know, when you're in class.
Oh, did
So
you
you're
say there
being,
was meetings what you could and couldn't say in a university?
yeah. Okay, let me just pull that back slightly. Yes, there were, but it was never said that it was directly. It was said as a way that you would not trigger or potentially isolate or offend a certain group. Yeah, definitely.
But shouldn't the
And then,
university be a place where offending someone in order to break through and discover new ideas, or basically a battle of ideas, wouldn't offense actually be contradictory to what an actual university should be?
I think in that one, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you know, you have Charterhouse. That's. I think that, you know, like once you've actually got some sort of friction, that's the entry point for discussion, definitely.
Yeah.
But when you've got when you've got organizations, and it's not just one. I've taught in quite a few. You've got that kind of commodity. So, you know, education in that period of time was largely drawn from external, not domestic students. So you've got, you know, making sure that, you know, you're in quite a few of them, where they have their values and their you know, corporate values that were there. It was main ones, which was, you know, looking after stakeholders, like all of that sort of which started to come through. Stakeholders, you know, external. So, you know, those sorts of responses as well. So, yeah, most definitely. It was never said directly as though you can't say this, but it was definitely implied, and there was definitely that kind of lessons given on to how you could use language that was very kind of, you know, opaque and nebulous, so that around these not mentioned directly. Yeah, that was definitely a big one. And there were, you know, there were those movements towards censoring, you know, academic thought that didn't occur with mine. That was UNSW Global, but definitely occurred with you know, some of them there. Yeah, and so they had to come out and go, you know, definitely, yeah, it was definitely something to consider.
Interesting, isn't it? Because actually there where I'm staying, there was an Uber guy from Bhutan. Is that how you say? Is that how you say that country? Bhutan.
Yeah.
And he was being a nurse. He was a qualified nurse over there. He's come here to do his training, and he's about to go back because he's paying $15,000 a semester. And so I said to him, so that's, if you add that up for a year, and then the 3 years that he's got to do, he's actually a cash cow for the universities, and he's just one poor person from, you know. And I'm thinking, I wonder if universities used to be a place of ideas, but that's sort of like old school. That's, you know, like a remnant from our youth, where now they're actually just factories to actually make a load of money and pump out these students as quick as it can. Because, I mean, it's almost like a river of gold with these students paying this amount of money, you know. And now he's doing Uber.
Not to say,
and I said to him, he's struggling to go back because the petrol prices have gone up, so he can't actually survive enough to stay here and pay the university things and everything else. It was a fascinating conversation, you know.
No, absolutely. I mean, and to extend it more for, you know, like you've got just on that, you got so many students coming across here on working student visas, so that's another huge one as well. So you've got like all of those English language courses that are taking up, you know, so these kids are, you know, looking for accommodation, having to work, you know, these hours to actually try and keep their visa valid, and then having to go to school at night from like 6 to 9, visa requirements as well. So it's a huge industry.
So with the pressure on you to self-censor, not be so much an intellectual move to sort of control you intellectually, but actually don't upset the students, whatever you do, because that's how we're surviving. So it's actually economically driven.
I would that as well. That's when it comes down to censorship as well. Who's the actual, you know, gatekeepers on this? It's a lot of it is self to make sure. Well, huge amount of it as well depends. When I first started off, you know, you had tenure, so you had a full-time position. Then it became casualized. So that's another big issue as well. So you know, every semester, every 12, 13 weeks, you have to then have a look at the feedback students have given to you. That's calculated, whether or not you can get shifts after there as well. So yeah, it's huge.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because you can't actually get comfortable in your role to allow yourself to even develop. You're just thinking, how do I? Yeah,
Absolutely.
wow, that's really fascinating to the pressures. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks
no, it's a huge one as well. I mean, and you have a look at, yeah, I mean, absolutely it is. You know, you self-censor because you want to make sure that you've continued work. There's no possibility of getting full-time work in any of these at the moment. It's all casualized.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a massive subject, the whole inundation of Australia's tertiary education system with foreign students as a backdoor to citizenship and all the rest of it. Massive industry, probably worthy of a podcast all its own, because there's been debated over this for decades that I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
People warned that the system would be taken hostage by basically interests that are antithetical to to Australian students. All doctors in Australia are now born overseas that are in receipt of Medicare payments. So it's like something's gone wrong that we can't even educate our own doctors. It's just it's a madness. Talking of madness, let's go back a little in your life. So I gather the book, The Bike, it comes from your early era, yeah?
Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, so started at with 31, so a few years ago again, but I'm still like floating on your comment there, John, about my youth, so I don't really want to give that up. So that was for full disclosure, 54, so 34 was when I finished it. So 20 years ago. 20 years ago. So that was listed for the Vogel, and I tried to do like a kind of, it was based on bicycle thief. So I wanted to actually have the bike in there as a key part, and documentary style realism. And then getting involved with, the actual processing and the publishing organization, and seeing how much gets chopped up, and they want a redemption in here, and the cover art gets taken over by different pace, and then it's marketing, and then when if I'm really honest about it, I didn't have the skill at the time to be able to navigate through all of that. I thought, this is my art, this is what I want to present,
Oops, sorry. I was going to bring you back.
Nice picture.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so I put it on the back burner. Kept writing, kept doing my thing, teaching. That took up a fair bit of time, and then 2020, I finally, I've been hitting everything for far too long, and got sober in May, and then I think it was like towards the end of 2021 where I had psychosis, and I had to go through that protracted alcohol and drugs. 2021 I was just ripping to get some writing done again, and I was really interested in how narratives are shaped, how institutions have their internal rhythm as well, which is when we come back to the organization of the university and those corporate and the addiction and the rhythm that occurs in addiction as well. And came up to, I started doing a bit of writing for you, John, so I appreciate it. You gave me my start back again. Didn't let me trip me about what I can and can't do, or length or anything. I think your only requirements was, do you have pictures? And the only one I couldn't provide pictures for was the meat as a meat processor. Yeah, which you found for me. I thought were amazing. So appreciate all of that. Just the fact that you've got these sorts of forums that you can have these long conversations. But came up here wanting to write an entirely different book, and melted. And coming up here and being in part of a small community, being part of having time to actually sit down and think and reflect, and I revisited it. I actually, had an accident going into an accident, pretty bad one. Almost took my toe off going into the wet season, and up here, like, everything has a potential danger, So I had to down the surgeons were going, oh, make sure you don't get any mud on it, because if you do, you can get this staph infection, which will, So I had my foot up. I had all of the manuscripts I brought up with me, and I started going through them again. And it was like, it's an unfinished story. So it's an unfinished part of your identity, like all stories are, they need to be told. So you can get a full picture. And so I went back and revisited it, and went and finished that one off. It's important. It was an important thing to do.
And one of the centers of the book is a sort of 3-day period. Have I got that right?
It's written from the perspective of Steve. It's a very masculine. It's looking inside that subgroup. It's written over 3 days. There's no breaks. It's just 3 days of unrelenting kind of addiction and having small deals and getting, some meth that you can swap off for, don't, or you can actually do that and swap this off for other sorts of things. So it's exactly as it over 3-day period leading up to the Centrelink Day, when everyone gets money again. So it's that period again. Everyone's on tick. Everyone's doing small deals, and you know that everyone's going to be home on these days because he can then collect. So how much does he extend? Well, the whole time trying to make sure that he can remain high and avoid the crashing down and having to confront the static that's in his own head and those intrusive thoughts. So that's the structure of it.
Do you think the addiction is in your DNA to become an addict, or do you think it was driven by external forces and it was just a coping mechanism to deal with the pain?
Really good question. I go back and look at that in different ways. Like, now I'm sober. You go back and go, yeah, definitely self-regulation for sure. I didn't have the coping skills to be able to self-regulate. People don't in this who are dealing with that. I mean, like, who wants really to get up in first thing in the morning and get drunk? People. It's not. I want to remove that morality, that moral kind of, judgment around all of this as well. I thought, like, I can either do this. So yeah, to answer your question, epigenetically, do I think? Yeah, absolutely. I think for sure there's those in people, whether or not it's part of the neurodivergent spectrum, whether it's like something to do with the hands to actually keep it down, or whether or not there's that drive. But definitely people who are want to escape that trauma as well, who don't know how to self-regulate, for sure.
American author that thinks all addiction stems from early trauma in your life. Anyway,
Gabor Mate.
I'm not always a believer in that.
Yeah, I don't.
Bundy, he became a serial killer. He says himself he had a great childhood. And I thought, what do you want to do? Oh, you gotta go kill people. It's I don't know. I was at a gathering once, just with a writers' gathering. It was writers are really interesting. And this woman got up and she was 60. And then all she talked about was how her father didn't love her enough. And it was this poem that she'd written. And then she asked everyone around the room what they thought. And they all thought, oh, beautiful, beautiful. When it got to me, I said, you're 60 years old, your dad's dead, and you're still not moving on with your life because of your father. Do you think it's about time you thought, well, I had a shit upbringing and maybe it's the time to plan my own route forward? Anyway, I wasn't invited back. But it was really interesting that there was just, you couldn't even suggest anything. You just had to go. And as writers, and don't you think as writers, we actually got to fucking shake up the core of society, or hold up a mirror and go, hey, Australia, this is what you look like, and go looking for the mysteries of us. Because when you say you're in the university and struggling, I wonder, as a writer, you're an explorer of the human condition, but how can you explore if society is going here? You know what I mean? Don't go here and here. You get trapped, and then somehow you've got to survive in that entrapment. Like, even say that square you're in here, this is square, and they always say you can't fit a square peg into a round hole, but you can fit a round peg into a square hole. And in every corner here, there is gaps. And that's where most of us live, in those gaps, that silence that no one knows exists, and become drug addicts, alcoholics. And so something's fundamentally wrong because we're trying to fit into a system which obviously doesn't sound like it was conducive to your soul. So you go looking for another way to live. It's fascinating.
Really, that's a really nice observation as well. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely don't think it's all, trauma. I mean, yeah, exactly. You're looking for gaps. You're looking for, I mean, a big part of community purpose, yeah, and a lot of that is you've got that community as well. You've got people around who, I mean, maybe it's an echo chamber as well, but you've got people who support. You got people who, I mean, definitely there was a part of me when I was using that I love getting out of it as well. I mean, there's not going to be, I was trying to get from childhood trauma. There was, parts where I love it, I'm partied and stuff. So I'm never going to go,
yeah, man.
Not part of all of this, It's just, I think there's that, it got to the point where, it became a way of coping, and it became a habit, and I wasn't moving forward, and when you're talking about as well, like, people getting to 65 or whatever and still going, my parents, you've got to do that shadow work yourself. You've got to be starting going, what is it I'm doing? What's the story about? You can't keep blaming. You cannot. I mean, that's it. They say, sobriety and that's what it's for people who want it. You've got to have a look. That was who I was. This is who I am now. What is it I want in my life? If you're to the point where you can see those people around you as people and not going, I will respond to this, and then that person fucking up because they did this to me, and I wasn't given enough love, or I was given too much, or
Yeah, too much. That's right. Too much. But it's just interesting because I've always written all my life. But I didn't show people for ages because I was so fucking useless at everything else that I thought if I show people my writing and they go, oh, well, that's fucking useless too. That's it. I got nothing, So I used to use it to, I'd show to girlfriends and stuff like this and things like that. And it wasn't until I think I was 30 that I won a national competition for a short story. I was like, holy shit. And then started to branch out. But I had nothing. I just felt I felt like the universe had sent me here just to take up a space. And I see a lot of Australians like that. And, they're craving for purpose. And we talk that it's victim mentality and childhood things, but they want to feel like they're here for something other than just paying bills and watching TV. And
This is some of what you've already said about the bike. I might just read it. So it's interesting. The book comes out of lived experience, but what mattered to me in finishing it was how to represent that world from within, rather than stepping outside it 20 years on and sober. The structure, rhythm, and language follow that logic. It unfolds continuously over 3 days with no real pause or release, staying close to action and dialogue with very little reflective distance. The aim was to let the form mirror the internal logic of that world, cyclical, procedural, and always moving, so the reader feels the pressure of it rather than being told about it. I wasn't interested in framing that world from outside or framing it morally. I wanted to build it from within, where violence, addiction, and movement aren't themes. They're the system itself. A huge part was also about giving voice to lives that are often misrepresented, moralised, or simply ignored in Australian literature, and allowing those experiences to exist with some level of dignity because those voices matter. So, yes.
That's cool. That's really cool.
There's
trying to find the logic is it's that whole one that you both do as well. Like it's show, don't tell. Let people have their stories like that. You build it up. With your theatre experience and John with his publishing, it's like you put them out there. You put all of those stories up. The truth, is with all of them. And people's, there are different aspects for this and how they've experienced that system within and the pressure points that's applied and that crazy internal logic that comes from, Yeah, particularly with the bike, I wanted to make sure that I got the language right, and I wanted to make sure that, you know, like I kept my narrative voice down to an absolute minimum, so that you enter into it and you feel that depression. Feel like there's no moralizing when they're picking them up or putting them in, or, you know, like that. They're not saying cops or whatever. That's just part of life. It's normalized. You know, trying to actually get back to the doctors, trying to do doctor shopping, actually, you know, get around, score from different people. It's you know, it's just oppressive. And I wanted to actually do that without giving, you know, war stories or you know, your own addiction story as well. Let it be told through that. People can come into it and make up their own mind out of it, you know, without me you know, dictating or telling people how they should be thinking.
It's always amazing how talented and creative a lot of addicts and alcoholics, to use those terms, are when they sober up. You know, quite. I think people look at, well, you see people on the street, you know, with their bikes curiously, and yeah, they just look like they're from another planet, and people just don't relate or understand what's going on at all. Do you feel that there's a complete?
Yeah, people move past, and they do with most worlds. You know, it's like they understand what's going on. You know, in all sorts of communities, how the actual community functions itself, what's going on with these people, why are their lives important. You know, we go through, you know, completely with blinkers on, being told that we should look one way. Why are they actually, and particularly with this group, you know, like it's you know, why are they doing this? You know, I get myself up and go and do this. How come they are actually using drugs? And then there's that whole morality that comes behind it as well. But if you can, in some ways, see the humanity that's in these stories, and they're everywhere, you know, you can actually see what you know, how they're actually functioning. Try and get some understanding to this, so you can move away and perhaps a different kind of perspective as well.
Don't you think, interesting in a different way, like you're getting to a question of, like, I was doing speeches in the city the other day, and I actually asked the crowd, why are you actually here? Why are you actually on this planet? Is it just to pay off bricked up air? Is that it? Or are you just here traveling a road that has been so well traveled, you can actually do it with your eyes closed or completely stoned, because the footprints are basically like those on the beach, so like a sheep's track? Or are you here and we don't know where we come from or where we go to, we just hope? Or are you here to explore the magnificence of life from your angles, using your senses, your heart, your brain, and all your other senses? And then even doing something, writing a novel about your life. So you've got to have a life that is worthy of a novel. And that doesn't mean like doing great things like climbing Everest. It's just exploring human condition, even if you're interviewing homeless people to why they got there. And so when you get to the end of it, and if that just happens to be angels, you can go, here's my novel. And you want to present them a novel that's worth reading, rather than going, oh, here's a novel and it's exactly the same as the last billion people who came up here before me. You know, I did exactly the same. I didn't get anything. Because it's growing up in Australia, this is what I found. Now, I grew up, I'm back here in Perth now, which I left. I found no one wanted to talk about the mystery of where we were, like above us. No one was interested. The people I was around, they were interested in renovating kitchens and a quick trip to Bali. And no one was really interested where we came from. It was like they'd been cast by an indolent God, and they were just skimming through life until they arrived at death safely. And I used to find that incredibly frustrating growing up and lonely, until I realized, well, I don't know, maybe I'm just a fringe dweller and I want to explore things. And now I find life fascinating. And I love being alive, even though I'm closer to the tomb than I am to the womb. And I think now, like at your age now is the time to really write and really look what's going on around you, because our world is in turmoil. And none of us really know why. I think there's never been a more important time to be a writer. And to show you why, the last play I had a play on in Melbourne. We were trying to get an audience, and downstairs there was two writers who were getting AI to write plays, and they were pumping out 3 plays a day.
Right.
So we've got that. We've got that chewing up our ass. You know, it's fascinating because eventually, if we let this happen, our history of this time now, of which you are a writer, of this time now, will just be an algorithm spewed out content because it's easy. And so I don't know.
I'm with you on that. I think that, the woo-woo is that I think art is the highest purpose, to live authentically, to actually give things by being present and giving back through those creations, right? And constant improvement. But I also think that, I really do, as a result of, what's occurred over the last 5 years, and people I think are actually moving to a more spiritual and profound kind of way of looking at and going, what was that all about? Some definitely. Recording those voices, like you do and John does, and I'm doing this up in FNQ as well. Those regional voices, those stories matter. People matter, and actually getting them involved in that sense of community, acknowledging them, acknowledging what people are going through, and giving them a forum and a place for those stories. AI take over. I'm hopeful, actually. I'm hopeful that it won't. I think people are wanting, particularly with, again, I'm of a certain age, right? So, but particularly with some of the students I see, they're into this authenticity. They really want to know what people are feeling.
Yeah, I'm noticing that with young people,
starting to connect, that they're far more and willing to actually go through it. I mean, having a look at a lot of the YouTube channels there.
Yeah, it's amazing. People are looking for authenticity.
I think that's a really big move. It's positive that's come out of it.
Yeah, and I also I'm noticing a lot of people are using AI as their friend now, and they call it their friend. There's podcasters now who are making huge following just asking AI a question. And I try not to judge what it is, but sometimes I feel like that's a dodo trying to get advice from the Portuguese, and it's this scary time. And I think if we are onto somewhere better as a race, going, we want more out of life than just materialism, then as a writer, and what you're doing is trying to documenting this exodus of people that are leaving this materialistic society, looking for something deeper, because so many people now tell me they're spiritual and they weren't previous 5 years ago, but now they are. They talk about a spiritual war and everything. This is what people say to me all the time. So you get down now, and the communities I sort of visit going around Australia, they don't talk about the footy ever. They don't talk about renovations ever. They talk about life. They talk about purpose. They talk about freedoms. They talk. They have questions about the Constitution. I mean, I'm not really into that anymore. But what I found fascinating is most of us grew up, we wouldn't have known the Constitution if we fell over it, and suddenly they're wanting to know about it, and sort of trying to discover who we are. And so I wonder if, as writers, and it doesn't matter what age you are or artists or anything, we are actually looking for what we've lost in COVID. And what we lost in COVID was all the myths of who we thought we were, because we weren't. Everything we built our identity upon is gone. I feel the identity of Australia itself is up for grabs, and that artists should play a big role in not telling people how it is, but showing people maybe our identity is amongst this rubble, a better identity even.
What's the community like where you are, Jeremy?
I love that. It's amazing. It's you turn up, there's this small theaters here, the Rondo. You're getting packed houses with local playwrights who are putting their stuff on up here. the community itself is large. It's really vibrant. There's some great environmental artists up. It's been really cool. Like, I mean, I've come up here and there's so much I didn't know about the history up here, or exactly having a look at, you know, what are some of the issues that are confronting this local area, and just seeing people putting their, not, it's that same rule again, don't show me, and they're putting up, you know, artwork to actually draw attention to it, allowing you to go into it and, you know, come up with your own idea, and you know, that tripartite. So they're producing the art, you know, then you enter it in a different place and can interpret it the way you want. I think that's something that's really positive up here as well. There's a lot of writers. They're moving a lot more regionally. There's a lot more freedom up here. Bookstores, you know, there's not many of them at chain stores up here, which is super cool.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, it's, God, trying to get that done down in Sydney is mind-blowingly hard, you know. And up here, you got stores take time, they'll put it out there, they'll give you that sort of promotion as well. Yeah, it's vibrant. The tanks up here always got, you know, a variety of different things on. You've got local arts centres, you've got the right groups up here as well. It's vibrant. It's you know. And I mean, this sounds like I'm having a dig at, you know, an ex-smoker. You know, coming out of Sydney where it was so hyper competitive, and a lot of it was just corporate driven, and you know, trying to actually get publication through a major publisher. Up here, it's not like that at all. It's though I might have, as my friend said, rainforest coloured glasses on. You know, might be tinted through.
Or maybe you've just taken the Sydney glasses off and can actually see trees.
Yeah,
now.
it's yeah. I mean, and that's been really cool as well.
Even when you say talking about towns, I mean, if you went up to Cairns, you know, you go through these country towns now, and a lot of them have lost their individual identity. You just come in, there's Office Works, there's McDonald's, there's Kentucky Fried, there's Bunnings. And here's a few decaying old pubs. That's the old town. And you go, next one is exactly the same. You know, so it's, I don't know, but to find a place that doesn't have it, a few towns don't, it's fascinating, you know? Yeah. Do you think you're better suited for a smaller community than you are for a city?
Like, like riffing, I'm just hearing what you were laying down before about, you know, like, what was your identity? How did that get removed from the last 5 years? It's true. I mean, it's kind of like almost, I thought that I was a certain way, and a certain person, a certain way of thinking, but actually getting up into a small community and you know, being around that has been mind-blowing. I feel like I've stepped into who it was I was, you know, who I actually am. And on that vibe you're talking about, it's community. Like, a big thing that I was teaching before was community, and those steps begin with us, you know, and it was like, you can't rely on other people to do it. You make those first steps, which is what I see up here. You know, the local artists up here, you know, are incredible. Like, they're putting on shows themselves. You know, they've got a vision of some sort of, you know, something they want to put out there, and they just, you do it yourselves. It's all, you know, driven by their own belief, and you know, a few friends who chip in and actually help to put it on. There's been some great stuff that I've seen up here. Yeah, and talking those community ones as well. What is required by the community? What does the community want to define it? I mean, Kuranda, very hippie, reminds me of a mix between you know, Byron and Nimbin before it became super commercial.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. You get that kind of vibe up here as well. You know, the next one is Mariba is going out. That's Ross. Is it Ross Hims? Yeah, he's a local member for out there. It's changing, but then you've got Youngaborough, which is, you got, you know, smaller areas. That's very much a book town. They have all of these bookstores in there. You are getting that. You get, you know, a lot of people with, you know, simpatico. They're doing their own thing, you know. No one really rags you out about where you're coming from. No one's like, you know, yeah, it's just everyone's kind of very much more accepting, and would have their own space. Yeah.
Well, it was very defined during the COVID era, because I went there on the trip around and was talking to people from there, and they were saying, look, they're not pushing the mask mandates, they're not following. And I wondered if it was because it's so far north that the government was too busy terrorizing everybody else. They couldn't send any troops up there. So there were actually a sense of defiance to them. You know what I mean? Plus, wearing a mask in that stinking weather. I mean, it was stinking hot and humid. Wearing a mask would be very difficult. But,
so I might just plunge back into the dark here. It published a story called The COVID Line, which I thought was a
you want to read some of that?
Yeah, I'll just read the opening bar, right?
Okay.
It's 7 a.m. because this will take us back, and then it's really interesting how different parts of Australia have evolved or ignored or just moved on from this era, or learned a really staunch lesson that the government is not your friend, whatever people got at. But anyway, this is the opening paragraph, the COVID line, by Jeremy Aitken. It's 7 a.m. Wednesday morning in early spring. It is hot under an almost transparent, clear blue sky. The tarmac is already starting to radiate heat and is steadily becoming hotter. A large white marquee has been set up in a suburban commuter train car park. In it, a police wagon with 2 young detectives is waiting. The detective on the driver's side is filming his mate. A student nurse dressed in full personal protective equipment, PPE, walks up to the passenger and slides a thin white swab stick into his nostril deep, looks at the detective in the driver's side, smiles and twists the swab around. The police officer is connected to the nurse like an umbilical cord. She pulls the swab stick out, places the sample in the vial. As the testers start to cheer, I clap. The constable has been tested, has both his hands on his forehead as tears roll from his wet eyes down his cheek, a common response from the swab. The detective in the driver's side smiles, waves to the nurse and drives off into the day. It is going to be a great day. So how do you look back on the whole thing? I never worked on a COVID line. What was it like?
It was crazy, John. I mean, and thanks for publishing it. Because yeah, I mean, I wanted to go out after all of this and go, what is actually happening here, and like being inside that system as well. So, got a job as working in a high volume COVID car testing center where we were doing like about 2,000 cars a day. People would line up. So it was huge. So, I mean, just from my own, I mean, how was it looking back? It was crazy. Nothing, you know, I would drive out through to far out west. And this feeds back to what you're talking about, that just the complete difference in how it was treated from suburb to suburb. So I drove around and work in a variety of them. Some had, you know, the choppers out there and, you know, you weren't allowed to walk and, you know, you had to have masks on. Some suburbs were completely chill. And it was just the difference, seeing the difference in how that was enforced from the police was amazing. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I mean, I went out there to try and find out, you know, what was going on, what was it like, and it was. I was working for New South Wales Department of Health, had no training when they hooked me up. I think in that article, about 10 minutes worth of training. I had these young dudes show me how to put on the PPE, do the testing, and I wasn't even aware that you took the plastic off the mask at the first part. I think I've put that in there as well. And come and look, I think, Jez, you're gonna be able to see a lot better if you've taken off the plastic in front of your mask. So we get tested first thing in the morning. We'd have rapid test, then tested in the afternoon. Then, you know, like we had that internal logic as well. Like one of them was we had these incredible masks on to start off with, you know, and then about a week into it, they changed the masks. There's no way you can actually cry. I went, I haven't really full-on mask. And they went, oh, no, we've now found out that we can use other masks and we're replacing them with this. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, prove it. Like, why are you? Is this just cut? You know, if you'd actually said to me, look, we've just found out that we're just running a bit fast. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That I can get into. But presenting me information without actually.
So did you go from one of the duck masks to just a normal face mask?
Yeah.
On the normal face mask that comes in a box, and on the bottom of the box it says not suitable for COVID-19. That's what.
Well, that's what I mean. I was a bit older, you know, so I was like
wearing a mask.
I was like,
not suitable for COVID-19.
Yeah, and putting clothes that I had absolutely no idea how to do or to take off or to, you know, just do properly as well. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the internal logic. You cannot argue against that sort of stuff. And that's kind of with the bike as well. There's, like when you get those loops around and you're going, it's like punching in the dark. You can't actually go, hang on, we were using this before. How come this has changed? Because you just can't get past that. So I just went, all right, well, let's see what happens. So we also we do rapid tests morning and afternoon. Test so many times. I was really.
Did that affect your nose? So you're doing it up the nose?
Yeah.
Are you starting to bleed and stuff? Because I know I interviewed truck drivers, and they said that they're refusing to do it because they're constantly getting nosebleeds.
That's how John very finally that opening. That's what would happen if you put it in if they were getting tested. And again, coming back, the one that I was at, that huge one, they would have truck drivers have to get tested daily. So, I mean, that's right. You have to get turned up and then get tested daily, and they couldn't use the rapid antigen test as well, which they all had. They had to use these ones, which went through. I mean, the like to be tested, and each one of them was about $250 for each test that went through. It was a huge amount. So
wow,
I'm getting tested, and what they would test. Yeah, it's about 190 to 250, and some of them were rapid. So there's a huge amount of cash that's being made on this. I invested into the wrong. I shouldn't have went to becoming a writer. I went down, should have been a laboratory tester. And so they'd have us.
Imagine the test they did.
Oh, the money.
Imagine the money, because we saw some of the big ones. Even in Adelaide, we went to one in Adelaide around the outside. The line was miles long. They were doing, and you said 2,000 a day. That's incredible.
That was mild. I started tracking them because I was there for So we'd have that test, and what they were meant to do is if there was a positive, if there was a COVID positive, they were meant to close down the lot, deep cleaning thing. We were being tested morning and afternoon anyway. So they had supposedly, I mean, it wasn't. They just simply changed us from being tested morning and afternoon, and they removed that because they were finding that they were getting some positives, and that would mean that they would have to close down and then do a deep clean. So, I mean, take that for what it is worth. That was what happened to us. So I went from being tested. So then I'd be tested at night so that if there was anything that came, they could close it down. But yeah, so they just, everything was just gradually, I personally found it like, I was really interested in how the mechanics of it worked.
Yeah, it's fascinating. How were the people turning up in the cars?
Seeing all of those trucks.
Or were they frightened?
Yeah. They were. This is a really interesting question. It depended. Now, the one out where I was, I'll mention it was out Lumia in Liverpool area. The majority of people who were coming out there were, were workers. So they had to go and get tested every single day. If they were going around doing cleaning jobs, working in people's houses, all that sort of things, they were checked every day. The long distance, the truckies who would come through, we had a different section for testing them. Constantly invasive, but they were more fearful and also not wanting to have their livelihood disrupted. They needed that money. They had to do it. So it was, I found a lot less, they were more resigned. It's like, fuck it, what else can I do? They had no voice. They had absolutely no way of protesting at all. Because you've got that internal logic again. I have, lots of them had the rapid tests, but they weren't allowed to use them because, all of a sudden, there's money that's not being made through, any of these agencies that are checking us. But then I noticed, then when I went back into when it all ended, they were going, oh, rapid antigen tests are fine. So that also changed as well, meaning, it was just all maneuvering around. Yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre, wasn't it? I don't understand how the rapid tests work because, there's all this discussion. I mean, there's all this discussion that they hadn't isolated the virus. So I used to think, well, how can something that obviously was made in the third world for 2 cents a thing, how come that can figure it out? And our top scientists can't,
Yeah, I there's all of those questions. See, that's the eternal logic, though. Like, if you start asking questions that are logical, you're going to come up to, you're not going to be able to defeat that.
If you ask them economically, though, like what you just said, this is how much money. You ask it economically, someone,
Absolutely.
as in all wars, and COVID was like a a battle between humans and COVID. It was real. There's a someone somewhere is making a lot of money, and look what you're saying, the
Absolutely.
amount of
Yeah.
money.
I mean,
You
like
know,
that was the thing that struck me. Like you're prepared to put, I mean, I'm older, but you're prepared to put people's lives in risk if this is what you're saying, to
yeah,
do testing, but then to actually not provide them with that level of safety, A, training to put on PPE, the protective gear, and
yeah,
then B, to then go, oh, look, we're finding that we've had to close a couple of these down because we've had positive results, so we're going to have to close down this entire section, which means 2,000 plus 3,000 cars a day tested. At that amount of money, you can work out that
yeah. So someone's going, hey, so it's almost like that. They're saying, it's two truths in your head at the one time. Yeah, COVID's really dangerous, but we'll shut it down. It's this bizarre sort of situation we were in. It's like when they say, they were saying, oh no, it doesn't cause myocarditis. It's not, it's completely safe and effective. And yet in a suburb of Werribee, every 400 meters, the marketing, how the council's putting in a defib. So if you do have a heart attack, if you time it correctly, you can defib your way to the hospital. So there's this strange thing that the two things, like there's a town in Norseman, and their defib in this remote town is covered in this thick metal with a combination lock, and you got to call 000, tell them where you are, and get the combination lock before you can actually get in and get the defib. So if I was on the ground having a heart attack and you're going, oh, shut up, Michael, I'm trying to hit the combination, 4, 3, it's this, there's like a series of bonkers. And yet, even though it was bonkers and a previous Australian, say 20 years ago, we'd be taking the piss of it. Now we weren't taking the piss of it because we've been taught that taking the piss is offensive. So shut up. This is where we lost our larrikinism, which
absolutely, yeah. That becomes also that part of censorship. Is it like who's actually making a narrative drift occur? And those are the things that are fascinating. How does the internal logic of that work?
Yeah.
Who's making money to actually put the defibs in and then putting the 000 number on there for a combination? I mean, yeah, someone hasn't thought this
so
through.
many. They're in lay-bys. They're everywhere. They're in schools. They're in primary schools. Like what? Kids have heart attacks. There's just, but someone's making a fortune. Or even the plastic that's in front of stores. When you go to buy something and you're looking through this sheet of Perspex, and because COVID can't actually get around, it's just, but someone made an awful lot of money out of that. I mean, they just suddenly they turned up everywhere. And so it's fascinating how that actually all works. I have no idea, but yeah.
Yeah, well, $17 billion is one estimate just for the cost of the vaccines, without everything else, without all the economic damage. And
17 billion.
17 billion, and millions of those vaccines, as I understand it, were never used. They ran out of date or whatever. So John Howard ordered, no, not John Howard, Scott Morrison, sorry, birds of a feather, ordered a dozen shots for every single man, woman and child in Australia. Now, obviously, they're not all being used. So that was a massive grift to the pharmaceutical companies. So out of all this, one thing that showed up in your writing repeatedly was that you were entranced by fighters. You did the Fight Club story and Jack O'Leary, a one-legged fighter and so on and so forth. So do you think that's a spirit that's been lost in Australia? And I might just look at some of these.
Yeah. I think that's part of that whole, leaning into it. I think that's part of, a definite huge part of masculinity, of having a shot, and I think us culturally as well. Something that's definitely been lost, and it's seen as something now that's kind of like transgressive almost. But there's definitely a huge part of that. I like that. I like that people who struggle. I like that sense of fight. I like people who are standing up for it as well. That one that I did that you published as well, John, the Never Tap Out, I'm a Warrior. That guy's story, again, was is a phenomenal story. Like how he was able to come back from those painkillers, from those drugs, and actually, you know, find him carve himself out a position. And there was that
I might just
sadness
read
also.
a couple of paragraphs from it, from the first. Yeah, will I go ahead now? Or?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, go ahead. So this is from a story called "Never Tap Out, Never Submit. I Am a Warrior," and the Sean O'Leary story. I'll put up the links later. In 2020, Sean O'Leary was living in a fog of painkillers, trying to navigate life with a new prosthetic leg. The 170 centimetre father of two sons weighed 127 kilos and was in a dark place, quote unquote, after a small cut to his foot led to a 6-year battle with pain, depression, 3 years of hospital visits, and multiple operations that ultimately cost him his right leg. Being introduced to the Straight Blast gym owner and head trainer, and in turn to MMA training, was the light in the tunnel that not only transformed O'Leary's mindset and health, but was a lifesaver when he lost his rock and great love, wife Rosie, to cancer less than a year later. Today, O'Leary has won some fights, lost a couple, but has earned his hard-fought reputation for never tapping out or submitting to an opponent. A mountain climb and competing internationally are next on his agenda. So, yeah, can you just talk about all that, the sort of courage that people showed?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like coming back from, it's a big thing about, I'm going to fit into a couple of areas, but men's mental health, that lacking in support for all this, and, you know, like there's a couple of things. Not he had a cut on the beach which turned septic. You can read the article, and that actually turned into a long period of, you know, like trying to fight to maintain the leg. It got into his bone. Coming back from that, his COVID had hit, and he got into training. So just before COVID, he got into training, and so his wife had then, you know, got cancer and was very unwell. And it's his last words to her, because the lockdown came. So she said, "Look, I want you to go to your training. I want you to go and continue doing this." And he's going, "No, I want to stay with you." And she went, "No, it's really important. You make me really proud." And so he went, and they locked down, so he wasn't able to see his wife again after that period. So it's like, it was. So he, you know, dealing with all of that. So he the article as well is talks about how he does it for her. He has to draw on something deep to actually.
Saying she was in hospital and he wasn't allowed in to see her, so she died.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was. I spoke to him. I mean, he was, you know, I've spoken a few times, but he was so moved that story was actually able to be published. You could remember her. There was pictures of her in that article as well. Yeah. But you've got to draw something from all of that, you know, and you've got to draw purpose from it. And his one was to keep going and do something positive, you know, to make sure that.
I go deep though. I mean, you say you draw purpose, but where is the humanity in that? Because I interviewed another nurse, and it was her last shift. She was 54 years old, like you, and there was a man dying, an old man dying. I think he was like in his 80s, and his wife was on the phone, and he only had a little bit of time to live. And she wanted to give him the phone, but the hospital said no, COVID. So she wasn't allowed to put the phone to his ear, and she wasn't allowed to put it on speaker in case it upset the other patients. So she had to be the bridge. So the wife said her last words to her husband, they'd been married for 55 years. The last words to her husband, 55 years, to the nurse, and the nurse told him, and then he said his last words, which hopefully something nice, to the nurse, and then she passed it on this, and she couldn't take it anymore. That's when she left. But there's a humanity missing there. You know, I mean, surely you would think as Australians would go, fuck off, let him talk to his wife, married 55 years, who gives a shit? It's only a flu, say goodbye. In fact, even worse, bring her in. And so there was this, and these are the stories we've heard that we need to talk about, because who we actually were as Australians, we went in those moments. Like I had, and then sometimes we were, like another woman, a 24-year-old woman, she died of a brain exploded from the jab, and a mum had to come down from Queensland to Melbourne. This is, you know, and she gets to the hospital, and the girl's like on life support behind a glass, And the nurses go, no, you can't go in. You know, you could get COVID or this COVID. And then a head surgeon came down and swore at them, opened the fucking door and let her in. And then we got a picture of her with her daughter. But the nurses don't, the humanities, no, this is the rules. You can't, you know, but that's her daughter. She's dying. Do you know what I mean? That's what I struggle with. Where's
I agree, and there's some of those things like as a humanity gain, like some kind of understanding of what's actually occurred. And I agree, like the whole thing, you know, like particularly in nursing homes and hospitals and stuff, it was just we weren't able to think it through. We weren't actually able to be off reasonable responses on all of this, because it was just, again, that whole, you know, narrative drift, you know, like you had people responding to like these nurses coming through going, we need to follow these rules, but nobody really understanding the rules or understanding what is going on, or understanding, when you mentioned that before, how could they have that pathy, the quick response testing when they don't even know what the virus was that they say? Yeah, they're really logical questions which weren't asked at the time. They weren't. You know, I was put into
and the answer was, if you did ask, the answer was, don't you trust the science? You're an
yeah, don't you? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, respect my authority. Yeah. Respect my authority. Whatever it was, yes, that you were given, because that's the logic that came through of it. You know, like you can't go, why? Because we tell you so. Why? Because, you know, you might be able to. How you don't know if you actually go down there, then that actually got you into a sense of madness. You know, like it was. You know, I was going through that, and that was even more maddening. You know, why? What is it? You don't. You know, you're getting caught up with that whole internal logic. That's the violence of it. That's the violence of the system. It's you know, set out to confound you. Why can't I go and see my wife? Because you know, she's dying. Why can't I see my wife? You know, because we say, you know, the logic of that, the internal logic of that is, you know, is enough to give someone, you know, massive kind of kick on a mood disorder or trauma with that itself. So you've got to find some purpose. I think that's what he's done, is to come back and fight. You know, is the humanity there? No, I totally agree with you. There was no humanity in that. There was no humanity given to a lot of those poor long distance. I mean, I say poor, to those people who were working long distance trucking, or to those people who had to go and get tested every single day so they could go in, and then they were considered to be the ones who were spreading or potentially, you know, breaking codes or whatever. And yet in other suburbs that I went to, it was completely chill. You know, sorry.
I was always shocked by the level of conformity of the Australian population, which many other people have commented on. Hundreds of thousands of people could tell that same story of an intimate relative dying alone and frightened in a science fiction, particularly an elderly person. All this PPE stuff, absolute nightmares, I know personally. And it was just an absolute shocker. No one's ever apologised. No one said we got it wrong. No one. It's just.
No, it's just move on. That's behind us now. Move on. You know, we don't want to talk about became Nazis. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. What happened to the fighting spirit of Australians? They're always seen, as you're saying, as larrikins and, you know, get out of my face, mate, sort of stuff. You know, like what happened? What happened? Get out of my face.
Well, it's interesting what you say about the money, Jez. That's what I think. Is this really money? Because these things don't make sense from a human point of view. But if you're protecting rivers of gold, then it kind of does make sense, because you're keeping the heightened fear up, and people are getting tested, people are buying masks, people are doing this, and suddenly somewhere someone's making a huge amount of money, and it's not personal, it's just business, you know?
Absolutely. That's where I sit down. I just went.
I agree with you, Jez. Yeah. You know, there's the vaccine, there's money. You know, I interviewed a. Sorry, we've got a little bit of a lag. That's why I'm over speaking. Sorry about it.
Sorry.
Off you go, Jeremy.
Oh, me. Okay. Yeah. I mean, look, from my experience, what I saw is exactly that. It was money, And then everyone was fearful. Like, you're talking about, what's your purpose? To pay off that box, to actually pay your mortgage. If you're out there and you're like, struggling from one page to the next, and you cannot afford to actually have that time off. You're going to go, even if you're resentful, and lots were, to actually go and have that testing done so that you can continue to work, because most people were on, and which is what I was doing, they're on contracts, or they're not paid permanently, so they can't afford to take that time off. And that's what I found, in particular in those areas. So why didn't they fight back? I think that they're hamstrung financially. That was my take on it. They like, if this happens, I've still got to pay my mortgage. Like I've got. Often the kids were at home, so I've got to then walk on. How am I going to, educate my kids? I've got 2 of them at home. We're trying to manage this. We're at limited amounts of money. I think it's cash and fear. I think there was a huge amount of fear that was put into there, because if you're not going to be able to, if you don't do this, you're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to pay your mortgage. And it was tight. I think that's the vibe that I was getting. People didn't do it because they were complicit. I think they did it purely because they needed the fucking money, and they needed to continue to work. And that's why I'd see them turn up again to get tested. They didn't. Who wants to have that thing jammed up your nose where your nose is bleeding?
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
A lot of this was driven by fear, that and a lot of AI was used in the development of these programs. So they knew that distancing, that we, as a social species, we'll do anything to protect grandma. So that was hauled in, and fear is a very powerful motivator. So they knew how to install fear in a broader population, which of course has been long studied from military campaigns, how to destroy and destroy. I'm constantly amazed by how the generation of journalists that I'm in the 70s now, is how compliant they were. They were all championing lockdowns and vaccines and all the rest of the garbage. And to this day, I saw one old mate, talented photographer guy, he's on his Facebook, I need to call the list, any anti-vaxxers get off here. And I just think, what the heck, mate? Where's your brain? What happened to these people that I always thought were so smart? Didn't turn out to be so smart after all.
It's like they got us to a point where you can't ask questions. If you asked questions, you were a heretic. And so, and that went to climate change. That went to everything. This is basically, you just don't ask questions. And they were enslaved by these enormous amount. Some of the people with the debt they have for a house in Sydney or anywhere in Australia, it's huge. They can't afford one payment, and they're time poor because they're working like crazy, and the kids just trying to survive. They don't really have 2 or 3 days to go researching and studying and understanding. They trust their government to keep them safe. So, and I think that's the issue we're seeing now, where Liberal is dying and Labor is struggling. Pauline Hanson's coming up. It's like an abusive relationship where they've suddenly realized, when my dad kisses me, he's not actually loving me, he's abusing me. And I think a lot of people feel they're seriously abused by the government, and they're rallying against it. That's why I think Pauline Hanson, love her or hate her, is on track to actually have One Nation maybe as a true political power in the country,
Yeah. The whole. The fear definitely. I think that that was a huge thing, a huge motivator for it all. There's the fact
fear of what?
I think fear of being of losing your place within a community, like you mentioned it, with like not having your mortgage paid, not being able to work. They did that to teachers, to nurses, to all of those sorts of people who were facing. You're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to travel. You're not going to be able to go to any of these sorts of weddings interstate until you've actually got you've complied. And that, they did that thing as well where you could be reported on if you were, walking in a group. I'm not sure if they had that. They had that down in Sydney, where if you're
You're having a backyard, police.
Yeah. They call it like it's bossy, you know. So yeah, there was that kind of, you know, when you start to fear neighbors, you're starting to fear that, you know, if you're doing anything, you're being observed, and you know that can be fed back. It's a huge way of, I think, some of the things that I saw, a huge way of getting people to become compliant. You know?
And tyranny needs compliance. The fundamental
Absolutely.
building block of tyranny, whatever form it takes, is compliance. That's why if you interview the people from the countries that have lived under tyranny, that's what they'll say: do not comply. That's their one thing: just don't comply, because that's it. It doesn't get better. It's like schoolyard politics. I mean, if one of us was a bully, say I was bullying John over there, and if he didn't fight back, I'd bully him every day until he stood up and punched me in the face. You know, the actual reality is the power is all with John. When he finally stops, I'm not taking it anymore. And so I think that's what we're seeing in Ireland at the moment. The island is literally shut down because the truckers have said enough. And I was talking to an Irish truck driver because I'm related to one, and he said it started with a few blokes, and they said, we've had enough. We can't make a living from the trucks. We're sick of all of what they did to us in COVID. We're sick of mass migration. We're sick of everything. Basically, they're ripping up the social contract, saying there's nothing in here for the ordinary fella. Which, you know, it's just continually getting worse. And now they're getting the army out in Ireland to try and clear the truckies out of the road. So we're back to the Canadian truckies thing. So it's explosive. And I do think the woman, we found out today, the woman who actually ended the Canadian truckies thing, she's now working with the Irish. So they've got her over to the Irish to shut that down. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see what had happened, because if you put people in a corner where they've got nothing left to lose, well, that's revolutionary times. And unlike us, Ireland is full of guns because the IRA never handed them over. So there's talk of civil war, there's talk of everything. In our time, in a Western society, I mean, who saw that coming? Who saw it coming? It's incredible times to be alive. Incredible times to be a writer. You know, I mean, look at every day. I mean, surely every day, Jez, you wake up. I don't know if you go online much, but every day it's like insane. You know, we have from men sort of one man going in to confess that he's killed his imaginary friend, to Trump threatening to destroy all of Iran, you know, wipe out a civilization, to Albanese. Well, he's just entertaining every day. So there's just this really tumultuous time, but I don't know.
Well, we might know more in a month or so when we run out of people and the lights are flickering and nothing's delivered to the doors. 3 days between civilization and chaos, you know, which is probably what we're about to witness in Australia. Who would quite know? But there's certainly predicting that absolute. You know, what happens if you can't deliver to the stores anymore, if, you know, if you can't put petrol in your car and even drive to the shops or whatever, which, you know, the whole of Australia is laid out so you need a car, you know, pretty hard to get by in most of Australia.
It's set up as a Los Angeles. You need a car to get around Perth. It's a car. Even the shops, they don't have walk-by shops. They have drive-in shops, you know, so, yeah.
So talking of courage, yes, we're running out of time, so we'll just can you tell us about the next book, or you're talking about the next book, which is called So can you just talk about that? I gather that
the bike is in the description.
This is the Dark Past, right? And the next
one, it's the Ascent. So, you know, basically coming up. And I'm using a lot more of the environment to actually form it as well, which I found fascinating. You know, like I came up here, you know, like the rainforest I thought was going to be silent, but you know, it's not. There's a constant movement to it. There's a constant rhythm. How that informs the book itself, like place and being up here, and you know what actually happens when you've got to just listen to your own thoughts and be confronted by that. So the book itself is about, you know, the psychosis, leaving Sydney, all of that sort of stuff, but then coming up here and finding that sense of place and community as well. So it's a lot about the landscape the divide, the coastal versus the country divide as well. I am about Exiles. One of the things, so I'm just flicking back to one of the main things I'm working on, is Exiles coming up here, and how Cairns itself is been white settlement. Obviously, I'm talking about he's from the cane cutters, from the Chinese coming through here. How like the blackbird coming through from the islanders, the Italians, the Sicilians coming through, and how that's all formed part of the place that is up here, and how everyone's coming to either. I thought I was running to a goal rather than maybe running away, or reforming or identity. So those sorts of things they're great kind of themes that I've discovered up here, and so it's a lot more reflective. I'm really enjoying the process, and put it back, I'm just doing it for myself at the moment. I'm really enjoying that process. So yeah.
Well, that's the liberty, the freedom of being a writer, because we were talking about writers the other day. Someone was challenging. I had another writer around here, and an artist, and they're saying, "Oh, you're just doing it for fame." I thought, no, when you're young and you're writing, yes, hunger for fame. I think John found it. I didn't. But once you realize the fame's not turning up, and then you're still writing like crazy, it sort of frees you up, because you're not bothered whether it gets seen or not. It's just something you're literally, obsessed with doing. So it's actually liberating. And then once you're liberated as a writer, if you can make a living out of it, lucky you. But it's still cathartic to do it, because you are a traveler through time. You've never existed before. I mean, we don't talk about this shit. They treat us like we're just sheep on a conveyor belt. But Jez, you've never actually existed before. Your DNA's never existed before. You are absolutely fucking unique in the entire universe. So why wouldn't the universe be interested to see what your views are of the internet? You're an explorer through time. I think it's miraculous that we're alive, and somehow our society, whether it's just to make money out of us, has convinced us that we're not even worthy of being written about. I remember one of the troubles I had when I was writing these plays about nursing home workers and stuff. This person said to me, "You're never going to make it, Michael, because you just write about losers, and no one gives a fuck about losers, mate." But I think, yeah, true. But I still enjoy writing those stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's one of the beautiful things, though, like, the getting involved in the process and doing it, because those voices matter. I mean, this conversation, and that's why I appreciate both of you, for giving this platform that people can have these conversations and get to it. Other things that aren't normally explored, like, just putting it out there because you're not interested in, interested in just actually having other people's voices and different opinions, and it's wild. And doing it for the actual purpose that you have no other choice. Like, that's you love the process. You go into it. You'd be doing the same thing whether or not someone can see it or not. That's part of that's part of who you are, and I appreciate it.
Cool. Anything else you'd like to say, Brother John?
Oh, well, we've been talking with Jeremy Aitken, who's a promising not so young writer.
No, I take John young. Thanks, John.
Yeah, take it, man. Hold on to it. Probably the last time you hear
it. So we'll put the book up in the Banned Book Company, and people can buy signed copies. I think we've sorted that out. And
I'll get that sorted out today.
That'd be great. And that's about a lifestyle that's transgressive. Is that the right word? Illegal. So, yes, look, thanks very much for coming on the show. Really good to see you doing so well, and happy out of Sydney, and you look healthy and happy, and
And thanks for talking about the COVID. There's really fascinating in those lines. I've met a few others that have spoke to me privately what it was like in the centres. So it's really fascinating because there's clues and hints and mysteries there to what happened, and you were there. Even it's fascinating. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate support, John, and you've given me. I really do appreciate it, and thanks for continuing to do what you do.
No worries. Thanks for helping me through my hangover.
You're charming, hungover or not, Michael.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think, yeah. All right, we're going out with the lucky country. Anybody watching live today, there's a march with Iranians and Jews today in the city. I'm going to go down and do some interviews and see what's going on. I'm quite fascinated by that. So I'll be there. I think it's 2:00 in Forest Chase. Otherwise, we've got another doctor coming on. Sally Price is coming on with Dr. Oosterhouse tonight at 8 p.m. Sydney time. That's it. Take care. I wish you well, Jez, and keep writing, brother. Be interesting to see. Give the angels a book to go. Oh, we're going to read this. Take care. See ya.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
See ya.
Lucky Country, available cafelockdown.com culture. Only
When
place.
I met Jesus Christ, he was almost 10 years old. And he was helping his mother push a trolley full of all they owned. And because they couldn't find an inn they could get in, they were heading to the city and leaving Bethlehem. Couldn't you perform a miracle? I'm out of them, he said. I tried turning nothing into warmth, but it just made my mother cry. It just made my mother cry. Mary Magdalene has become a man, and tonight he's old, and she has been riding my tram. Now it's late and she's trying to sleep beneath the poster for a bank. Your dreams are important to us as it bathes her face in gold. Come give us your natural gifts. We make wealth from toil. Come pretend for history's page that we're advancing Australia fair. Let's pretend that we're all advancing Australia fair. Back down the road I found the church we built on the black man's bones was empty, and out the front a sign read all but sold. A sign read all but sold. And we all owe so much money, but to whom we're not quite sure. So head down, we just keep running along our fading golden shores. So head down, we just keep running